Now's the perfect time of year to explore a tropical climate, but Yara might not be the most welcoming. But we have a pair of guides on hand. Navid, Khavari, and Benjamin Hall are here to help us explore the island. How are you both?
Good. I'm still beaming that you're saying my last name right. That's fantastic.
So, one of the main things that I'm getting a lot from seeing Far Cry 6 is that you over there are making a game of contrasts. One of the first things that strikes out is you came out pretty recently and said this is a political game. That's pretty contrasting to a lot of games, as we know, who sort of avoid that, and you've come out in the open and said, no, this is a political game. But what I want to know is what came first? Did you start thinking we want to make a political game, or did you build the setting and think this is actually the perfect time for us to say something now?
The reality is any work you put out is going to be inherently political. I think it's just to what degree is it political. So for me, it was, and the team, it was more looking at, revolution, what are the themes that emerge from revolution? As a writer, as a narrative director, as a project, you're going to soak up, the themes that are present every day around you, right? So I think for us, when we were looking at, making a story about a modern day revolution, what are the questions that are going to be asked, in this fictional context from our characters? So we wanted to go to places of talking about imperialism. We wanted to talk about what are the conditions of the rise of fascism, that you're never safe from tyranny, that, human rights abuses, free and fair elections. Like these are questions that I think are present now, just as they were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. So I think what I was trying to do with the statement, and by talking to the team right from the beginning, is just to say, let's be fearless about how we approach this, and focus on the story we're telling, because the best fiction, I think, has some meaning to it. It asks questions, and we really wanted to do that with Far Cry 6, balancing that with an epic game, an epic revolutionary game. That's what we were aiming for.
Yeah, and then from the world side, that meant that we could look at it, really looking at the different layers of history, so taking into account all of those different elements that Nav just talked about, the 50-year mark, the 100-year mark. We really wanted to tie into that, and when we were crafting the world with the team, we wanted to show that those layers of history within the world of Yara as well.
Like we said before, you've been talking about this being a game of contrasts, but Far Cry has always been a series that's worn almost its slapstick nature, action movie nature, quite freely. Has that been at odds with telling a serious message while also having a game including an alligator with a t-shirt on? Is that sort of muddy the water a bit, or do you find it that players might find it even more accessible to take in this message if there's sort of a familiar action movie-esque wrapper around it?
You can't really have one without the other when you're doing a Far Cry game, and it's all about balance. I think in its DNA, in the brand, it's about having mature themes. It's about having powerful, villains that will charm you and try and convince you of their opinion, but marry that with, some humor, some action adventure, and I think to what I was speaking about earlier, I think the best sort of fiction, the best action adventure, stories and games, it's all wrapped into one package, one unified package. And I think, my job and the team's job is just making sure we find that balance. And so right now we've been talking a lot more about the gameplay, but as more of the content comes out, and, once you're able to get a hands-on, you'll see that we really tried to ground these elements, these sort of wilder elements in the fiction, So you've seen the what we call the resolver weapons from Juan Cortez. Juan Cortez is this spy master who, would wait doing ambushes in the jungle, and he's had to do this DIY philosophy, and he got inspired by reading comic books, and he was like, we can do some really crazy things if we get creative with our weaponry. So it was just about grounding that into the world, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that to come.
There seems to be, from what little we've seen so far, there seems to be more contrast in the play styles too, with a lot of the customization, exploration, building your vehicles and your weapons. To me, as someone who favors like the sort of stealthy approach in Far Cry games, it looks like this contrast has almost played into allowing more diversification in the way that you're actually able to play Far Cry. Is that sort of something that naturally happened, or was that one of your goals?
It was definitely one of the goals that we wanted to set out with, was giving the player as much agency as possible when it comes to how they want to approach different scenarios and different elements of the story, the missions, but also when they're out in the open world hitting the checkpoints or the flat cannons. So tying the resolver philosophy into the gear sets and the weaponry meant that we could really allow players to build themselves out in different play styles. So being a stealth player is great because it means that you're going to be able to you're going to be able to find different pieces of equipment and change your weapon loadout and the different resolver weapons as well. There's different ones that kind of promote being able to play in a more stealthily way. So you'll be able to gear yourself up in that way and approach different scenarios in a way where you're going to go in and try and play quietly. Comparing that to someone else, like I like to go in loud, so I'm going to equip myself with all the gear. I'm going to have the Armageddon strike. I'm going to go in with the flamethrower, and it's going to be a different experience than the one that you have. And that was something that was important to us from the beginning.
Yeah, the team sometimes, I think, my team anyway, sometimes hates playing with me because I will destroy everything the moment I head up into an FND base, and it's like the perfectly laid out narrative and conversations. But yeah, it's definitely part of the experience.
What I want to know is the story behind the meeting where you decided on Macarena would be the song of choice to attack people with. I can't imagine that's a stealth weapon either. That's on the louder spectrum.
I think all the weapons, really, the resolver weapons, like Nav touched on earlier, the fact that we've taken this fantasy, this resolver philosophy, and then fused it with the idea that Wine had of combining it with these kind of comic book stories that it'd been reading, really allowed the team to just kind of go wild. So like the concept art team had so much fun doing different drawings, different styles, different ideas of taking all these pieces of everyday items and jamming them together, and all of that has just allowed the team really to have so much freedom and expression with the different the levels of ingenuity in the gear sets when it comes to the resolver equipment. The Macarena, I think was it with Eduardo, our audio director? Yeah, we were.
It must have been our audio director, Eduardo Weissman. Yeah. I'll throw him under the bus. I honestly, I didn't see the reaction coming. People love that gun, so it's great.
Is that going to be the only song then, or are you going to have like the greatest hits to attack paramilitary to?
I don't want to speak for Eduardo yet on that one. Yeah, I think we'll save that. We'll save that for more to come on that one. Unless Ben,
that's fair.
Go nuts.
No. I think I'll speak to the soundtrack of the game. Like I don't want to spoil anything that's coming, but just the soundtrack's phenomenal. The work that's been done by Eduardo and his team, and then obviously working with Pedro Bonfman on the actual, the composition of the music is phenomenal, and working with those guys in terms of how we've worked with the music, with the different scenarios that we put you into, but also the different areas of the world that you're exploring. The music changes and evolves as you travel through the environment, and I'm looking forward to people playing that for sure.
And I think that just to follow up on that, the balance that they found on the audio side of licensed music, finding artists, like really unique and diverse artists that can speak to Latin America and what you'd hear on the radio in the Caribbean. It's so much fun. They put a ton of work into finding amazing tracks that you can listen to while you're driving in your vintage car. And then on the, balance that with Pedro Bronfman's score, which I think a lot of folks are responding to right now. In a lot of ways, Pedro's score, I call it like the other character in the game. It's like almost like a narrator over the entire game that just sort of sucks you in, and just helps push the story, push the meaning even further. So I got that score playing constantly while we're writing. So yeah, I'm excited for people to see more.
The world you're building is also quite a new direction for you as well, isn't it? You've visited the tropical locales before, but this is the first time we're seeing a much more built urban environment with armor and streets and much taller buildings. Has that been a challenge for you to create, or has that been like sort of an exciting new sort of locale to start building?
It's certainly been an exciting challenge for the team. I mean, when we set out with this idea of building a modern day guerrilla revolution and the idea of having this dictator that was controlling the country, those words kept coming up, like the idea of a country and an actual place that you're going to fight for that's an entire country. So that was really what kind of brought that to life, the idea that the team, we wanted to build the notion of it being an entire place. So looking at it from an infrastructure point of view and the historical point of view, like to create this place that feels like it's been there for a very long time, and as the player goes through it, they get to learn about the history and the different challenges that the islands had throughout its time period. But then also bringing in those urban environments was something that really helps make it feel like it's a place where people lived, people worked, and people still do, and now just under different terms. So this idea that the island being frozen in time, you get to see these decaying urban areas that are punctuated through the landscapes of these beautiful biomes that you get to explore, that in themselves are so diverse. Going to the Caribbean and building a Caribbean island really allowed us to just tap into so many different types of flora and fauna and landscape. It was great for the team. The team really enjoyed getting into that and utilizing that to build our Yara.
And having such like a dense and expansive island as well, how have you had to sort of balance that with ensuring the experience is the same or as close to as possible over both generations? Are there going to be differences? Will the world be less dense on older consoles? Have you had to sort of make amends somewhat to make sure things are running on both generations? How's that worked for you?
No, the team have been working incredibly hard to get the game running smoothly for everybody. So that's really been the goal that we've had is to make this experience smooth for everyone, no matter what console that you're on. And then obviously playing on the newer machines that have got more power, that there's different things that we can do with it in terms of shadows and draw distances and being 4K 60 FPS on next gen consoles. Obviously the loading speed, getting into the content as well makes a difference. But really the team's focus and goal has been making sure that we can create an experience that it's as smooth as possible for everyone on those Gen 4 consoles too.
And I want to talk a little bit about the sort of crafting and customization with some of the weapons, the vehicles. Is it almost an homage to like real Latin America, where the idea of building new things, that ingenuity plays a lot into the way of life, especially in places like Cuba? Is that sort of your nod to the industrious people making stuff and living their life through that sort of medium?
Yeah, I think the inspiration really was seeing how people can, under difficult circumstances, under a blockade, can find ingenious ways to survive and make do with what they have around them. And I think for us it was about honoring that, but also pushing that to how does that apply in a modern revolution. And when you look at revolutions in history, it's always about this small group using whatever tools they can scrounge up, whatever tools they can get their hands on to fight this overwhelming force. And so it felt, this sort of DIY aesthetic felt very natural in the context of Far Cry 6. And I think the creativity, the ingenuity, the surprise that you'll find in our weaponry, in our customization, in the looks that you put on as a character, I think is going to be really exciting. And I think it's another way for players to express themselves, right, within the universe of Far Cry 6. So I'm really excited to see how people respond to that.
And finally, just a quick one. I know you can't give too much away, but as someone who was a big fan of Far Cry 5, the ending of that was hugely impactful. And I know you've briefly touched on it in some interviews in the past, but is that sort of high impact not only to the individual story you're telling, but to the wider narrative of Far Cry? Are you sort of swinging for the fences for that big unexpected ending again, or are you keeping it all in your head?
You know,
so
I can't talk about that.
I know you've used the word
You know-
big or biggest so far.
We're all using the word big and biggest so far. Yeah, I think the what was most important when we were working on the narrative was that you would have a feeling of satisfaction, of the revolution and of your experience in the revolution, and it really boils down to the themes of the game and the characters and the journey of Danny themselves. So it's an epic story, so it will have an epic conclusion, and you'll just have to wait and see.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for this brief tour around Yara. Can't wait to visit the island myself, October 7th. And everyone out there, make sure to subscribe to GameSpot, because we're going to have tons more Far Cry 6 content coming your way over the next weeks and months. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.